Hello, I am here representing the Island School Economics team to interview you.
Hello, I am the chairman of the Institute of Economic Research of Renmin University.
Thank you for accepting my interview. So, what is your opinion on the current economic situation of China?
In order to understand the economic situation, we must first observe the main macroeconomic indicators. The GDP growth rate was really promising, the growth rate reaching over 10% this year. However, the GDP per capita was only 7,534, which is problematic because a high percentage of the population is under the poverty line. The unemployment rate was acceptable, averaging a 4.1%, which is in range of the government target of 5% or lower. The biggest problem, however, is probably the inflation index. Inflation in China has been steadily rising throughout the decade, and this July, it reached 6.5%, a record high in 3 years. This is problematic because inflation is known to feed on itself, which would become a big problem if it continues to rise.
What is your opinion on the depreciation of the yuan?
I think that it was very intelligent for the Chinese government to control the price of the yuan. If China allowed the yuan to appreciate significantly, that would encourage domestic consumption, which would be good for world demand and thus a boost for economic recovery. But policymakers would not relish the prospect of raising the cost of China's exports while economic uncertainty threatens contraction in its main markets. This explains Beijing's calls on the US and Europe to address their own problems of excessive debt and inadequate savings. However, bitter political division in the US over weak economic growth is an obstacle to such discipline.
Thank you for your insight. So, Mr. Chairman, do you have any observations of any trends of the Chinese economy over the last decade?
In order to observe trends in the Chinese economy, we must first go back and look at Chinese history. Since the late 1970s, China has moved from a closed, centrally planned system to a more market-oriented one that plays a major global role. In 2010, China became the world's largest exporter. Reforms begin with the phasing out of collectivized agriculture, and expanded to include the gradual liberalization of prices, fiscal decentralization, increased autonomy for state enterprises, creation of a diversified banking system, development of stock markets, rapid growth of the private sector, and opening to foreign trade and investment. China has implemented reforms in a gradualist fashion. In recent years, China has renewed its support for state-owned enterprises in sectors it considers important to economic security, explicitly looking to foster globally competitive national champions. After keeping its currency tightly linked to the US dollar for years, in July 2005 China revalued its currency by 2.1 again.
Thank you for the informative answer. So how do you think imports and exports affect China's economy?
China has been increasing its imports and exports over the years due to several factors. One of them is that an increase of China's products' competitiveness that led to an expansion of their shares in the international market. To liberalize trade in China, the Chinese government reduces administrative obstacles to improve its attractiveness to the foreign investors. The government's effort paid off with an increase in exports to countries such as US, EU, Hong Kong, Japan, ASEAN and South Korea. We hope that as the country prospers, the standard of living will improve. Currently, China has a total value of import of $956 billion in 2007, which is an average annual increase of 25% since 2000. This is due to the increase of living standards in China, which allow Chinese people to import goods from the international market. Furthermore, the influence of price rises in the international market and the further decrease of custom tax level results the growth of import in China. In addition, China has a total val.
So, what do environment factors have to do with the economy of China?
Well, that is a delicate matter. A long-term threat to China's continued economic growth is the deterioration in the environment, notably air pollution, soil erosion and the steady fall of its water table in the north. Recently, the Ministry of Environmental Protection has stated that China's current mission is to develop laws and regulations for environmental protection. In order to do so, the government is going to organize the development of a pollution prevention plan and ecological conservation plan in key regions and river basins. There is also talk of organizing the implementation of laws, rules and regulations on pollution prevention of air, water, soil, noise, solid waste, toxic chemicals and vehicle emissions, and to guide, coordinate and supervise marine environmental protection work. Most of their aims are about planning things that should help the environment. I can't say that I know if any of them have been put into action, but it seems like the progress of the projects are slow.
Mr. Chairman, can you further explain how these environmental factors can affect the economical status of China?
Certainly. Pollution represents what economists call an externality, which is a cost the responsible entity can escape but that society as a whole must bear. With market forces unable to address such problems, many environmentalists suggested that government has a moral obligation to protect the Earth's fragile ecosystems, even if doing so requires that some economic growth be sacrificed. The task of public policy is to find the proper balance between the two. In a recession, the balance shifts to promoting economic prosperity and away from, quote, spending money, unquote, on the environment. Economic activity, both production and consumption, relates to the environment in two fundamental ways. For one thing, we draw resources, both renewable and non-renewable, from the environment to produce goods and services, and we also emit waste into the environment in the process of both producing and consuming.
And this concludes our interview. Again, thank you for accepting our interview.
It was a pleasure.